I'd like to call this meeting to order and welcome to Coeur d'Alene City Council meeting. It is June 17th. Roll call, please.
Gabriel.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Evans.
Here.
Gookin.
Yes.
Wood.
Here.
English.
Here.
All right, we have an invocation from Kurt Anderson. Kurt, are you here? We're going to move along to Pledge of Allegiance. Kenny, would you lead us in the pledge,
We have
please?
to, Mr. Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Kenny. So I have a couple of proclamations. So 18 years, Peter Luthrup has been on the Planning and Zoning Commission. So if you'll come up, Peter and Amy, you're going to present this for Peter. We think it's a big deal, Peter. I know you don't like the attention, but tough.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a hard time hearing back there. I thought not the PA system, but anyway, I have my hearing aids in. But be advised that I get somewhat emotional. It's a hangover from my grandfather, I'm sure. So I apologize in advance, but they're tears of joy whenever they appear. So with that,
Okay,
thank you
second,
very, very much.
we're going to present it. We're going to read it to you, make you cry.
I just
Okay? Just
want to get it over with.
sit there and take it. You're worth it.
All right. Hi, Peter. It is my honor to share this with you today. Whereas Peter Luthrup has dedicated 18 years of service to the Coeur d'Alene Planning and Zoning Commission, equating to 3 full terms with unwavering commitment and exceptional dedication. And whereas Peter's contributions have been instrumental in guiding the growth of our community through his involvement with the 2022 to 2042 Comprehensive Plan, updated impact fees, numerous amendments to zoning code, and more than 400 public hearings. Whew. And whereas Peter has been a loyal member of the Tubbs Hill Foundation Board and participated in the Coeur d'Alene Parks Department's Open Space Committee and Parks Master Plan Subcommittee, and whereas Peter has served under 4 mayors since 2007, his long tenure has been a testament to his character, professionalism, and positive influence. And whereas Peter's dedication and hard work has positively impacted the Coeur d'Alene community. And now, therefore, I, Amy Evans, on behalf of Woody McEvers, Mayor of the City of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, do hereby proclaim June 17th, 2025 is Peter Luthrup Day, in honor of his long and distinguished service.
So as I recall, when I first met you, I think you were sitting in another commission where Christie was sitting.
Absolutely. Congratulations.
Thank you very, very much, Amy. Thank you all very much. I'm a big supporter of local government. I mean, it's the best. You have discussions amongst you. Everybody knows what you're talking about. Everybody gets the background. Everybody gets what you get. You make your discussions and you make a decision. And you know why you vote. I mean, it's just a wonderful thing. Now, I want to recognize my wife, who can't come tonight. She's my Jiminy Cricket. I want to recognize my daughter, her son-in-law, and 3 grandchildren in Olympia, and my other daughter here in the audience. I appreciate this. And I don't know how to behave, but I'm very proud of being able to serve with you or help you or do something. Whatever I did, it was enjoyable. I think this started back in the late 1950s. Down where we lived, there were the Smiths, the Barclays, the Crimps, the Foxes, and across the street, there were Luthrups. And the Gunlacks were up the hill a little bit. And with that, John and I were the seniors, the senior boys in the neighborhood. I mean, this is when you'd come from the beach, you quit swimming when the 4 o'clock whistle blew, you'd quit playing quick kick the can when the streetlights went on. But that didn't stop John and I from knowing everything, because we were the boys and we were the oldest. And we started talking to Sandy about things way back then and telling her, how she could do better, do this, do that. Well, that continued on as we grew up, matured. We didn't see Sandy that much, but didn't stop us from giving us for John and I to give her our advice. Not well-founded, we didn't know what we're talking about, but we knew what she should do. So after about 40 years, I retired and came back to Coeur d'Alene. And Sandy is very diplomatic, very nice, and she talked to me one time. Essentially what she said is, Pete, this is the time you can either put up or shut up. If you want to understand what your city's like, volunteer. It is not the cities of the 50s. And I think that's how I got here. And I'm very glad I did. Now, there may be some other people watching tonight that are the Sandys and the Johns and the Petes of this world. I encourage you to volunteer, no matter what you do. It's just enjoyable. It's wonderful. So I thank you for this, and I have one public service announcement, if I may. And that is that the Art Manley Scott Reed July 5th cleanup on Tubbs Hill begins at 8:30 on the 5th of July, which I believe is a Saturday. Goes from 8:30 to noon, and Huckleberry ice cream will be available about 11 o'clock. So with that, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
We don't want him to step down quite yet, so he gets his nameplate, for all the years served. It even has a little, wear and tear. But,
I could still put it up here when I come by
the
myself.
planning department is super appreciative of all you have done for us and all the meetings that you have sat through. And then we have our chairman and vice chairman from the Planning and Zoning Commission to make a few remarks, so if they can
good.
come up. We have Tom Messina and John Ingalls, and then we'll do a quick group photo, and then we'll move
Okay.
along. Thank you.
Quick rebuttal.
I just want to say thank you, Peter, for 18 years of sharing Tuesday evenings with me. I appreciate
It was
it.
very enjoyable,
Yes.
even the nights you wore hats.
Clips, sticky notes, dog ears. What it tells, he's been through that packet for hours and hours and hours. And that translates to asking good questions, being informed, and he really knows his stuff. So that's with that. Second point, and Peter talked a little bit about volunteering. And there's a fellow that used to sit up there in the big stage, Dave Walker. Dave used to always say, there's two people in Coeur d'Alene. There's residents and there's citizens. Residents pay the bills and they go about their day and they're fine and whatnot. On the other hand, citizens put their shoulder behind things, they volunteer, your word, step up to the plate and get the work done. You guys are all citizens up there. Here's a citizen right here.
Enslaved black people in the Confederate States from a slave to a free people, a status only enjoyed previously by white people. And whereas on June 19, 1865, Union General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, to announce the end of the Civil War and the abolition of slavery to approximately 250,000 people still in bondage in Texas, 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, making a pivotal moment in the fight for freedom and equality for black and African Americans. And whereas the 117th U.S. Congress enacted and Joseph R. Biden Jr., 46th President of the United States of America, signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act into law and proclaimed June 19, 2021 as Juneteenth Day in observance, establishing the 12th federal holiday and the first new federal holiday since Martin Luther King Day was adopted in 1983. And whereas the state of Idaho is home to a resilient and proud community of black and African Idahoans, for some the history goes back generations of miners, explorers, trappers, and soldiers plying their trade in Idaho. Whereas Juneteenth is a day to reflect on the historical and real current struggle for freedom and equality, and to recognize the continued need towards progress towards a more just society. And whereas this day serves as a reminder to the enduring legacy of freedom and the importance of working together to ensure that all people have the opportunity to live free from oppression. Therefore, I, Dan English, on behalf of Woody McEvers, Mayor of the City of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, do proclaim June 19th, 2025 as Juneteenth Day. In Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, recognizing the historical significance of Juneteenth, supporting the continued celebration of Juneteenth to provide an understanding for the people of Coeur d'Alene to learn more.
Thank you. At the Human Rights Education Institute, part of our mission is to celebrate diversity and human rights through education and programming that teaches about our history and understanding varying perspectives of our community. One way we do this is to teach about cultural holidays, and today I'd just like to take a moment to briefly share a little history and why Juneteenth Day is so important in our region. As mentioned in the proclamation, September 22nd, 1962, President Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. This declared that if the Confederate States did not rejoin the Union by January 1st, 1863, all enslaved people in those rebellious states would be freed. On Freedom's Eve, the first watch night services took place. Enslaved and free African Americans gathered, awaiting news for the Emancipation Proclamation had taken effect. Although their prayers were answered, it was only through the 13th Amendment that emancipation actually ended slavery through the United States. In the westernmost Confederate state of Texas, more than 250,000 enslaved black people in the state were finally freed by executive decree 2.5 years later. This day came to be known as Juneteenth. By the end of the Civil War, approximately 180,000 black or African Americans had served in the Union Army. Black troops, known as Buffalo Soldiers, in the days when the U.S. Army was segregated from 1866 to the early 1950s, were sent by train from Fort Wright in Spokane to Fort Sherman in Coeur d'Alene and played a significant role in the history of North Idaho, particularly during the Big Burn of 1910 and the Idaho Mining War. Their all-black regiments were known for their bravery and dedication, earning the respect of the local communities. They were deployed to various locations in North Idaho, including Wallace and Avery, to enforce martial law, fight wildfires, and protect mining property. The Juneteenth flag uses symbols and colors to represent the holiday's significance. The red, white, and blue colors mirror the American flag, signifying that enslaved people and their descendants are Americans. The curved arc represents a new horizon and hope for the future, while the central star honors Texas, where Juneteenth originated, and is called back to the U.S. flag, representing that black people are free in all 50 states. For a little perspective, between 1500 and 1820, 12.5 million African men, women, and children were taken from Africa and sold to various slave trades around the world. About 410,000 were brought to the United States. As of 2010, there were 42 million. The black and African American presence in Idaho started small. Just 60 free colored men and women were recorded by the territorial census in 1870. One of the earliest known is York, a frontiersman, hunter, and likely the first African American to cross the continent. York was an American explorer who made important contributions to the Lewis and Clark expedition. However, he was not free and was enslaved by Captain William Clark, and after the expedition's return was denied his payment and his freedom. Jeannie Eva Hughes, class of 1899, was the first African American to graduate from University of Idaho. She won the prestigious Watkins Medal for Oratory in 1898 and graduated with a Bachelor's of Science degree, one of 7 students in the class of 1899. In 1948, after racial discrimination prevented them from buying property elsewhere in the city, the Haymans bought the sandstone house at 617 Ash Street in Boise. Mrs. Irma Hayman was a vital advocate for her community, serving many years on the River Street Neighborhood Council and acting as the chair from 73 to 74. The Irma Hayman House is now a historic site and cultural center that celebrates and amplifies the stories of historically underrepresented communities, past and present, through inclusive, culturally mindful public programs. Boy, that was a mouthful, sorry. Dr. Thomas Lee Peirce is a third-generation Idahoan and the grandson of pioneering Black Idahoans who came to Idaho in 1909. He became the first Black man to serve in public office in Idaho when he was elected to Pocatello's City Council in 1973 and became the city's first Black mayor in 1976. There are more than 350,000 Black and African American active duty and select reserve United States military members currently serving around the world, and over 2.4 million Black and African American veterans in the U.S. Unfortunately, despite our commitment to be an inclusive community, the Idaho State Police reported 54 hate crime incidences in 2023, matching the previous peak in 2020, and out of those 54 incidences, 18 were specifically against Black people or African Americans. Data from the U.S. Justice Department for 2022 indicates that 70% of reported hate crimes in Idaho were against a person's race, ethnicity, or ancestry. After recently experiencing hateful acts against its African American citizens and visitors, and on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Human Rights Education Institute and concerned citizens of Coeur d'Alene, we would like to thank the City of Coeur d'Alene's Council and leadership for swiftly approving a new hate crime ordinance in an effort to demonstrate its commitment to no tolerance to racism in our beautiful city. Thank you. In closing, I would like to invite our community to HREI's annual regional leadership panel discussion this Thursday at 11 a.m. at HREI's building. Together, local city and county representatives, students, members of color, and marginalized groups from our communities answer questions, tell their stories, and find solutions to move past racial and equity disparities and into a new change in culture and collaboration. Our guest experts are motivational speaker and equity specialist Katara Johnson-Jones and Dr. Scott Finney, Director of African American Studies at Eastern Washington University. And thank you to Councilmember Dan Gukin for attending as our City of Coeur d'Alene representative. Thank you again for the opportunity to present this educational moment and recognizing such an important day in our nation's history. The historical legacy of Juneteenth shows the value of never giving up hope in uncertain times. We appreciate the proclamation.
Thank you, Jeanette. Great job. All right, moving on. Katie, are you going to kind of talk about our financial statement, the end of the year audit?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I am pleased to be here to present our fiscal year 24 overview of our financial statements that we've just completed a audit with an independent firm, Alpine Summit. Alpine Summit typically prepares a presentation and gives presentation to council. However, their representative had an emergency, so I am here. I've been living and breathing the numbers alongside of them, so I'm happy to read their slides. So why do we get an audit? Idaho state statutes require that a municipality like us have an audit every year by an independent CPA firm. And so we have completed that for the past fiscal year. And the purpose of an audit is for management of the city to provide the trial balance, all of the accounts, the debit and credit activity of all the accounts of the city. And the auditors go through, they do testing, and they come up with an opinion of the accuracy as far as whether or not the numbers can be relied upon. So our auditors have given an unmodified opinion, which is considered a clean opinion on our fiscal year 24 financials. And that is in the audit report on page 1 through 3. They also have a report on the internal controls of the city, which is very important to ensure that the city is following best practices as far as segregation of duties and the other number of internal controls that help safeguard the assets of the city. So they also provided an unmodified opinion, and that is detailed on pages 92 through 93. And we also have a report on compliance for our federal funds, and this is required by the federal government. And we have not had any issues in the report on that. We were determined a low-risk auditee. So just a few financial highlights in the general fund. We talk a lot about the general fund because it's the chief operating fund of the city. And at the end of the fiscal year, the fund balance of the general fund was $19 million. We had an unassigned fund balance of $12 million, which represents 22% of general revenues. That is within the recommendations from Government Finance Officers Association. Our general fund operating revenues increased by $4.2 million. A number of these, if not all, were one-time events. We did have an increase in property taxes of $830,000 in FY24. There was an increase in the revenues for ARPA funds. We do not recognize the revenues until the allowable expenditures are made, and so we had we finished up a number of large projects in FY24. So we recognized those revenues. One-time revenue sources, one of them was a $1.57 million settlement from ICRIMP for the police department storage fire. And so that we didn't spend much of that because a lot of the items that need to be purchased also need to be stored. And so some of those purchases are waiting on the building to be completed. And then there was a $1.185 million land transfer reimbursement from Ignite. And this is sort of an odd revenue to state in financial statements. It's not an operating revenue, it's a one-time revenue that Ignite was paying back for a land purchase that the general fund lended money for that.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Sure that wasn't the wastewater fund? Or was that general fund?
So a portion of that, it was lended from wastewater. The general fund did loan $1.185 million. And so in our wastewater, the ARPA funds construction projects. So here's a general fund revenue and expenditure comparison. And you see in FY24, we showed that sort of leveling off as far as revenues versus expenditures, but in 2024, we are seeing that expenditures exceeded revenues. Here's a breakdown. Balance is important. Government entities like the City of Coeur d'Alene can have inconsistent revenues. Property taxes, one of our main sources, comes in 2 payments per year. Our state payments, which are a large source of our revenue, come in quarterly. So having a healthy fund balance is important for cash management for the city. It also helps us address unexpected emergencies. And we have uncertainty with state and federal funding, and they protect the city. We don't want to necessarily be borrowing. In some cases, if our cash balances were to go low, we may have to borrow from our other funds or an outside source. And one item that is of importance at the moment is qualifying for a lower interest cost as we move into the bond sale. So I touched on this. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends a minimum of 60 days, 2 months of general fund operating revenues in our fund balance as unassigned. Here's where we stand when you look at our revenues. We would have 80 days of revenues. And when I prefer to look at expenditures personally because, you know, revenues can fluctuate, and we would be at 75 days for 2024, so within that guideline. Just a couple of highlights in our two largest proprietary funds. Water fund revenue decreased by $118,000. That can depend on the season, what sort of summer the city had, and that is a 2% decrease from prior year. Operating costs increased by $324,000, a 4% increase from prior year. That can be attributed to salary and benefit increases that have been part of an ongoing contract citywide. Net loss was $91,000. 2023 was an income of $352,000. Our wastewater fund operating revenue increased by just under $640,000, and that is a 5% increase. Operating expenses increased by $731,000, and that can also be attributed to not only salary and benefits costs, but also capital projects that they're working through as part of the capital projects plan. Net income from operations was $4.1 million, and 2023 was $4.2 million. The water fund operating revenues and expenses, you see 2024 was close to breaking even. And wastewater fund, the revenues exceeded the expenditures, and it's my understanding that is part of the rate study plan for wastewater fund. And I will stand for any questions.
Council. Mr. Gookin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Katie. Appreciate it. I just want to help with your understanding, my understanding of a couple of things. And so I went through the audit and I looked through things that have changed dramatically. And I know you didn't do this. You're just reporting this. So this is, I know you're filling in for Tony.
I prepare a number of the financial statements and write some of the notes. Tony prepared the slides you see today.
Very good. So one of the things I noticed that had changed radically from last year to this year is something called the custodial credit risk. It's on page 35. And so last year it was at 500,000, and this year it's at 13.5 million. And can you just explain what we're doing with that money, why and why it's considered at risk?
Yeah, so Idaho has laws that restrict our abilities to purchase financial or invest money, and there are regulations. We really can't put anything in anything riskier than a treasury, and so that line is not related to that concept. But I just want to make sure that that the city has practices that are aligned with Idaho law and are also ensure that the city's cash balances are in a secured sort of bank account or CD or treasury funds. So that line item, off of the top of my head, I do not know the big change. I can speculate that it has something to do with the some investments are fully collateralized, which means beyond the $250,000 of FDIC insured dollars, we pay for all of that to be insured in the same fashion. And that can come at a cost. It would reduce our return on the investments. And so off the top of my head, I think it may be related to that, but I'd be happy to dig into that a little bit more and just ensure or give you assurance that the city's funds are secure.
Yeah, and that's kind of, the language that they're using here, and I know this is the government language, is, custodial credit risk. And so that's like, is this really a risk? But if the goal of this is to generate more revenue for us, in other words, investment revenue, and it's all legal and you're okay with it and everything, then it sounds good.
Yeah, thank you.
So, but I just say it's kind of like the way they state that, it seems kind of alarming, and especially for a jump from $500,000 to 13.5 million seems like, whoa, what's going on here? So if you're happy, I think we're happy.
And, you know, a lot of the audit, we try and provide context to the numbers, and I think that disclosure probably needs some wording in order to explain those changes. So I will ensure that's in there next year.
Great, thank you. And then the other question, and I already went over with this with you just before the meeting, and so I appreciate your responses. So on page 39, we talk about lease income under note 5 to the financial statement, and it lists the various things we have leased, but it doesn't list all of them. So is there a threshold below which the audit would not list some of our leases?
I would have to ask Alpine Summit, that they're the experts as far as what would require a disclosure, and so I will follow up on that and get you an answer.
Well, I do appreciate that, and thank you again for working on this and for providing those answers. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anybody else questions?
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor, congratulations on a clean audit. That's
That was
really
good.
remarkable. Well done.
Thank you. I have to thank my staff too. They're wonderful. So.
Thanks, Katie.
And, Mr. Mayor, my
I'm sorry.
follow-up, Katie, I'm just assuming because in here, this 12% increase that you noted with the expenditures and operating from the general fund, we're going to have more detail on what that looks like when our financial workshops or budget comes up, along with the water rate expansion plan that is part of it, and
Yes.
explain those
Yeah,
dramatic
that
differences.
especially the water rate plan sort of feeds into the conversation we've been having on where the cash is going to come from for those needed projects. And the other percentage increases, I plan to, during budget, go through where we're seeing the increases, why they're there, and, you know, are they one time, are they ongoing? And that's important information going into budget season to look back at prior years, so.
And the 12% being a little more dramatic than normal.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Katie.
Great.
All right, we're moving on to public comments. Hopefully, everybody that wants to talk is signed up. If you haven't, there's probably another sheet out there. I'm going to go right down the list. Jim Coeur, Coeur d'Alene, come on down, Jim. Welcome.
Thank you.
Becoming a regular.
I'm here on a friendly errand this time.
What?
I'm representing your friends and neighbors on North 7th Street, where we have those two giant, dangerous cottonwood trees. And I watch school children pass under them every day and so forth, and other children in the neighborhood playing in the reach of those branches and limbs. I want to thank you, council members and mayor, for doing whatever you did behind the scenes, because tomorrow morning those 100-foot giants are coming down, and I'm so excited. So if you're not doing anything at 7 or 7:30 tomorrow morning, come by. The 1500 block of North 7th Bluebird Tree Service will be doing its thing. And I thank you very much, and I can't wait.
Thanks, Jim.
I wonder if he can come answer our phones for all the people who are going to be mad about those trees coming down that
Are you
don't
gonna
know
have
the
cook-
backstory.
You gonna have cookies and coffee and stuff?
Those are the big cranky people.
Laura McCroskey. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Mayor McEvers and council members. And thank you so much for your very important Juneteenth proclamation. And I want to thank also Jeanette Laster for her very informative presentation on the history of Wallace at St. Luke's Episcopal Church. We'll proceed down 7th Avenue, I think well away from where those trees were, so I think we're safe. We'll go on to Sherman Avenue and proceed down in a very orderly manner, no disruption of traffic. We will obey traffic signals and walk carefully. Our purpose is to remember Juneteenth and also to honor all of our citizens and visitors who have been harmed by racism and bigotry, and also to celebrate the diversity of our neighbors and visitors. And we're going to end our walk at Independence Point, and we're going to have some music and a little bit of a celebration and gathering. So I would like to invite everyone to join us. It starts at 5 p.m., as I said, 5:01.
The Idaho State Police was fabricating investigations that officers working outside their jurisdictions were on DUI emphasis patrol, which their employer, in this case was the city of Post Falls, absolutely made it clear that they were not engaged in any DUI emphasis patrols, while their officer is out pulling over juveniles. Of course, juvenile records are sealed, so it makes it a little bit harder to look into. Now, you guys have a DUI emphasis patrol coming up that you're participating with the Idaho State Police, I'm sure, of course, for the 4th of July. They're not a trustworthy organization, and when you engage in activities with people that aren't trustworthy, it lowers the standard of your police department. You know, it's really important here is that you can get into public corruption complaints, of course, go to the Idaho Attorney General. So you guys looking into those things, you could file a public corruption.
Thank you. I came to bring an issue that's come up in the Fort Grounds neighborhood. Several people are concerned about safety on the 4th of July. In years past, we had barricades that were brought in to limit or stop the number of cars that come into the 3-block area close to where the fireworks are put off. And that stopped. The last 2 years, we haven't had them. The residents, we man them and just allow people after a certain safety issue. There's people lined along both sides of Lakeshore Drive. Kids, families, picnics, their lawn chairs, and kids are running around, and there's cars going by. And even during the fireworks, there'll be cars driving on Lakeshore Drive, and they'll not be able to find any place to park, so they'll just slow down and sometimes stop in the road and block everyone that's sitting there from watching the event. So I don't know if you're aware that this was something that was happening for many years, and it's not happening now, and we're wondering if we can get the barricades back. And the residents there